Hi there, welcome to Shandon United Methodist Church, Heart to Heart. We're here this evening with Dr. Hal Croswell, Shandon United Methodist Church's favorite eye doctor, who also does many of our medical missions to Haiti in particular. Welcome, Dr. Croswell.
Thank you, Shannon.
We're glad you're here.
Nice to be here.
And we know you do so many medical missions to Haiti, and you've done them for decades now.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Haiti now.
Well, Haiti is, at the present time, is having problems with political instability and corruption, along with the pandemic, which has led to a food shortage, and also increase in the poverty level because of the economic situation being as bad as it is. It is contributed to by all of these elements.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a travel ban for any teams or people going into Haiti at this time.
It's unsafe there.
Yep, because of the violence, And the pandemic is, I think, what I read has improved some, but it's still a problem, Sorry.
Bishop Dorsey talked about hunger made visible in his letter. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. Have you seen hunger made visible in Haiti before?
You do. And most of the statistics you read about 2/3 of the people in Haiti live in poverty. And it's estimated that about 2/3 of the children there are malnourished because of that poverty level and the being able to get proper food. So it's very evident, and depends on what area of Port-au-Prince or what area of Haiti you're visiting. There's some slum areas in Port-au-Prince that are utterly unimaginable. You just can't imagine what you see in these areas with the children and the adults, even with hunger and a lack of everything. And it's just evident. You can find it. You don't have to necessarily see it when you walk down the street, but it's right around the corner in most areas of Haiti.
Yeah. Right now, though, with COVID and the pandemic, there is increased concern because of the loss in wages. The Haitian people usually, the majority of them make less than $300 a year, if I remember our previous conversation correctly. And now they're making less than half of that, according to Bishop Dorsey's recent letter.
I think the estimate is that the average Haitian, those in the poverty level, will make less than $2 a day, and that's going down. You have to understand that with all of the political infighting and corruption and the pandemic, all of these items lead to the economy is just almost non-existent. You have an unemployment rate, I'm not sure what the exact figure is, but I'm sure it's well over 50 or 60%. So if people aren't earning, of course, they don't have money to buy food or buy anything with. So, and to further amplify the situation, you've got inflation. And so you've got where the gourd, which is the currency in Haiti, was worth, say it was 60 gourds to $1 5 years ago. That has gone at about 140, 150 gourds to $1 at the present time. And that has since fluctuated and improved. But still, it makes it more difficult for people to go into a grocery store or any store and buy food.
Yeah.
And you'll
How
find
are they able to eat?
Yeah, food prices there are not much different from what you see here, because most of them are imported.
Yeah.
And Haiti produces very little in stable items. Most of them are imported.
So what we're talking about is a humanitarian crisis or famine, because given those numbers and figures, it's just obvious that people can't afford to eat there. Do you find that to be true?
In a lot of areas, yes. We've had, in the past, we've had a school lunch program that the South Carolina Conference of United Methodist Volunteers and Mission has supported. And where the children were given one meal a day at school, and many times that was the only meal they might get. And since schools were not open with the pandemic, many of these children were not. It increased the problem of starvation and hunger. So the churches had to take on a role to try to provide food for families. With the pandemic, there's been a interruption in the food cycle, in the food chain. You have, typically in Haiti, people grow mangoes, bananas, coconut, whatever, on their property, and they'll take it to market, and they'll sell it, and then with that money they'll buy what they need, or they may trade, or whatever. So it's a definite food exchange and a food thing that's going there all the time. Well, the pandemic has interrupted that. So now where you used to have a lot of food on the street that people could buy at a reasonable price, you now have a very limited amount, and of course supply and demand. If there's not much there, the price is up. So it creates quite a problem for families to find food, and particularly in this 2/3 we're talking about that are in the poverty level, for them to find food and to be able to feed their family.
Yeah, Bishop Dorsley talked about seeing the children, seeing their faces without smiles. He said that was hurtful.
Yeah, Dave Drager, who is a UMM coordinator in Haiti, wrote the same thing. And I've witnessed that in the past, not so much in the recent years, but I understand it's gotten much worse now. And you have to understand too, there are 300,000 to 400,000 children in Haiti that don't have parents, that live either with friends or in orphanages or whatever. And so that increases the problem of, children can't expect to get out. There's no way they can buy food or anything like that. So it increases that problem. And I think for what we have seen, that hunger problem is improved over the years with various organizations going in and supplying food items that are high in protein or whatever. I think you and I talked about our first trip down to Haiti in the 70s. There was a protein deficiency disease which was present in children called kwashiorkor, which is an African name for protein deficiency. I visited the pediatric ward at a little hospital in Jeremy. There were 9 children on the ward. All of them were dying, and all of them were dying from protein deficiency, which was a totally preventable disease. It was a very difficult thing to watch, see.
Yeah.
But that, with a lot of the non-government organizations from this country and other countries going in now, that has improved. And they are now showing them how to grow certain crops that have high protein, and also how to get what to buy, and rather than corn or maize, which they were feeding them primarily, and that's why they had that protein deficiency. So that has improved, but it still exists. It still exists.
But there's been setbacks with COVID that have kind of pushed them back. It's not a protein deficiency, but it's more systemic and related to COVID. It's political too, with their economic crisis and their current leadership.
Of course, you have to understand in Haiti, even in good times, the 2/3 or the ones in poverty, life is very difficult for them every day. I mean, and then when things like this happen, it just compounds the situation and makes it so much more difficult. So it's easy to see why it's such a fine balance there with these people that are in poverty and getting enough to eat and surviving.
Yeah.
That when you disrupt any of these, the food chain or anything, or the economics picture there, then you create a situation that makes it very hard on those
already
with the least.
unstable.
Yeah. So the hunger situation increases with that, and that's what we're witnessing now. And the church has said, and I've not been there because of the pandemic. In 2 years, we've not been able to end the violence. But the description by Bishop Dorsley and Dave Drager, who's on the ground there, it's just heartbreaking to hear what they're describing with the children, whereas they normally run up and down the street singing and laughing. You got a gaunt look with hunger. I mean, it's just
horrible to read. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And I imagine it's really horrible to live out there, because they're writing that they're using all of their monies for rice and beans and oil right now.
Well, and you have to understand that Haiti, you have 10 million people, living in an area 1/3 the size of South Carolina, which means you've got about 800 people per square mile in Haiti.
It's a lot of people.
And I mean, even Cuba and Mexico, Cuba I think is one in every 250. 250 every square mile, but in Mexico less than that. But it's so densely populated that the demand you got in that area for food, it increases the problem. It increases the problem.
So Haiti is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere.
It is.
And
it has that distinction, poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And it's been that way since it declared its independence in 1804.
Wow. You know a lot about Haiti. We can't even imagine that kind of poverty here in America.
It's unimaginable. I mean, we describe what we call as culture shock. And that's why people have to be careful with going there to work because of I've seen teenagers with teams going in that had to leave. They couldn't, it was created such emotional shock with them. And it's unimaginable. I mean, as I've always said, I define poverty as what we see in Haiti. And not so much in the larger metropolitan areas, but in the outlying areas and slum areas outside of Port-au-Prince and the main cities. It's just unimaginable. I mean, it's hard, you can't describe it. It's just no way to describe it.
What do you think Americans need to know or need to understand?
Well, most people ask, well, you know, why is it like that? But the nation itself of the country of Haiti, you have very little immigration. There are none. You have more wanting to get out, of course, and there's just nowhere for them to go. But it's just been a problem that has existed there for years. And I'm not sure all the reasons, except that poverty is just, it's always been a problem there. And the devastation you see from the hunger and all, it's bad.
Overwhelming.
But it's hard to, you know, people say, well, why, you know, and why do you have all the hunger and all? Well, you have to understand the government does very little for the people. So whereas in this country you've got social programs that help with, you know, people that in need, and you have non-government agencies here all the time that can help with the homeless or with those that lost jobs and have no home, you know, no family, no food. I mean, there are agencies that can help them. Whereas there, the government there's no social programs run by the government to help those people. And
has no social programs. Wow.
So
they depend solely on the NGOs.
NGOs, and as I told you yesterday, the schools, 85% of the schools in Haiti are run by the religious organizations, Catholic, Protestant, Methodist, Baptist, all different denominations that have schools there. Only about 15% of schools are provided by the government.
Wow.
Now, the colleges, secondary education, yes, they have some government, but most of the secondary schools and
now,
primary schools are run by the churches there.
Dr. Crosswell, I know you wouldn't state this, but you helped start UMVM. It started partially in South Carolina and is now a national program. And you were a part of that.
The father of UMVM was Dr. Mike Watson, who was a family practitioner in Bamberg, South Carolina. And Mike was on the board of UMCO. And at the time, Harry Haynes was the director of UMCO. And Mike saw this need and came up with this idea and really was the one who got it going. He invited and recruited several of us, George Strait, as you know, in our church, and myself, and there were about 7 or 8 of us initially. But Mike was a real instigator and was the one that got me into it and got me involved. And in fact, as I told you the first time, he asked a couple of us to go down on a fact-finding trip for Haiti. The reason we went initially was the fact that Haiti had put out a plea through United Methodist Committee on Relief and the World Council of Churches and through the Methodist Church in Haiti for medical help. So Mike called me and asked if we and another friend from Bennettsville, who was a surgeon, Jinx Michael, and I would go and on a fact-finding trip to Haiti. So we did in '72 and came back with a report. And
72. 1972.
1972. And we spent about a week there with the bishop of the Methodist Church, traveling around and going into the area of Jeremy, which is where we are now, which is where they really needed care.
Which is where the eye clinic is now, in Jeremy.
Was over 1 million people in an area with very little medical care.
Wow.
So we saw the need, came back, and made a presentation to the conference, to UMVM and the conference. And then the ball started rolling. They had teams from South Carolina Conference and the Western North Carolina Conference went in and built the original clinic buildings. And then we started with teams in '74 when the clinics were complete. And so we've continued since then. It's been a growing thing. I mean, it's much larger and much more inclusive than it was when we first started, but that's how it started.
So that's amazing.
It's been
and you
a journey that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I've been very happy to be a part of it, fortunate to be a part of it.
You say you see the light of God there. Talk about that. Talk about the light in the Haitian people. Well,
you know, the thing that has always impressed all of us that go teams is that most of the Haitians have very little, and most of them have a smile on their face, and they have strong faith.
Yeah.
You go to church on Sunday morning, you have to scramble for a seat. I mean, and they have annexes they're sitting in. The faith is very strong. And I told you, I think one of the prayers that was in the Haitian prayer book that I read, it said that, God, in spite of hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, we're still alive. So we know you love us. Thank you.
Wow.
And what a prayer. I mean, if you've lost everything.
What a prayer.
And another quick short story. After the devastating Hurricane Matthew in 2016, one of the ministers was out checking the area around Jeremy in the southwest was just devastated. And one of the ministers was out checking the damage and came up. A lady was coming down the road, and he stopped and spoke to her and said, "How are you? Are you okay?" And she said, "Yes, I'm all right. I lost my home.
Oh.
I lost all my possessions, but I'm still alive, so I'll thank God."
Wow.
And that's their mindset. They live with they live in poverty. Most of them. They live with difficulty, and every day is a struggle. But they have a smile on their face, and as I've told many of my friends, we don't really have problems. One short story illustrates this. After the Hurricane Matthew devastated the southwest part of Jeremy, Father Bracco, who is the director of the St. Luke's Foundation in Haiti, he's a Catholic priest, went down to visit. And he stood there and he said, you know, at times like this, you kind of wonder, where is God?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, then I started thinking, he said, you know, the real truth of the matter is that God's looking at each of us and saying, where are you? And I remember that from the time he sent me an email just after the earthquake. And that means so much to me. And I said, you know, I've always said, I don't think God creates these catastrophes and these tragedies and the storm all that occur. But he does expect, and I think he looks at us as Christians and those that can to help where we can, to share your talents where you can to help those when these things occur. So I think it's a challenge for us as Christians to do that.
Yeah.
Don't have to go to it. You can give, you can provide money, you can give a lot of ways you can serve, and I think that's what we depend on with Haiti, and that's what I would see is needed for Haiti, and I hope Shannon will continue to do that. They've been very generous and very helpful, and I hope that will continue.
Our humanitarian crisis and the famine that's going on, we're trying to help raise money for them. We're doing a special offering here at Shandon, And tell us what you think that money will go for and how much of it will get to the people and how it will help them.
Well, it's been designated for Haiti Hunger Program, so it'll all go for food.
Okay.
And the thing about UMVM, there are no administrative costs. Every dollar you give for food will be $1 spent on food in Haiti. We have a system for wiring the money into Haiti, which is very minimal fee. So for the most part, every dollar goes to provide food. And what the churches are doing, they are buying the food in from the market in Haiti. I'm not talking about individual, I'm talking about bushels of beans and rice, this type of thing. And then from that, families are coming to the church and they're able to give them food and give them something they can cook at home and prepare. And this has been, is being shared with all the circuits, the Methodist church circuits in all of Haiti. And as you've seen from some of the correspondence we've gotten back from the bishop and from Dave Drager with you, it's meant a great deal, but much more is needed. And we hope that it will be more successful. If you can't give, pray. Say a prayer.
Amen. Right.
A prayer works. We need prayers and we need funds for that hunger program, and we just hope that people will respond with both.
Amen. Well, Dr. Hal, thank you so much for being here and for telling us about the Haitian people a little bit more than maybe we've known before, and for making real to us their true need, and that we can be a part of helping them during these hard times.
Well,
we thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.